unified response by all left-wing organizations against this type of censorship. Well, the guy who leads your party was on my show, and he was cheering this on, and I pointed out it's going to happen to them, and it happened to you guys immediately. So So here, Facebook escalates attack on. So here it is. Now they get the message, Glenn. Isn't it amazing? Here it is. Facebook disables pages of the Baltimore People's Power Assembly and its administrations. It deletes pages of Struggle, La Luca, and Socialist Unity Party. On January 22nd, Facebook disabled the main pages of two major community organizations, People's Power Assembly and Women in Struggle, and activists around the country who have played roles in either group. Facebook sparks anger after shutting socialist pages. Here is breaking. Facebook shut down a major left-wing group in Britain. Why is Facebook silencing political activists who speak out for Palestine and Black Lives Matter? That's who they shut down. Facebook took the action on Friday, shutting down the Socialist Workers' Party page and removing dozens of leading SWP activists from the platform. The SWP Facebook page regularly posts in support of Palestine, Black Lives Matter, and against Boris Johnson's COVID policies. It also hosts dozens of online events every week, and the activists across the country take part in it. And here's what you said. You said Facebook has shut down the accounts of one of the biggest left-wing organizations in Britain, the Socialist Workers' Party. The SWP Facebook page posts in support of Palestine, Black Lives Matter, and against Boris Johnson COVID policies. Congrats to all who urge this system. So that was, I didn't enjoy that happened, but there was some Schadenfreude happening on my end after that happened. So please bring Glenn back on. So, Glenn, go ahead. Just respond what you would like to say to that story. All right, your audio's off. Your audio's off. What happened?
So that British Socialist Workers' Party, unlike those other idiots who cheered it on only to find themselves victimized by it, actually were pretty consistent before this happened in opposing even the deplatforming of Trump, knowing that if they cheered this on, it would likely come from them. They were among the few principal victims of this. You know, I find this has been going on for a while now. Like in 2017, I've talked about this before it was even talked very much about. I reported that Facebook, in like 99% of the cases, they get these requests from the Israeli government to remove the pages of Palestinian journalists and activists. And what the Israeli government says is that they're inciting violence and for that reason ought to be removed. And what that really means to the Israeli government, the way you incite violence against Israel, is if you say that the occupation is unjust, if you say that it's justified to resist troops who are stationed illegally on your soil, the way if like China or Russia or Iran stationed troops, military troops, and took over the United States, we would feel a justification to resist that. If a Palestinian says that, they get accused of hate speech and inciting violence. And Facebook, in almost every instance, removes their page. Why? Because Israel is much more powerful than Palestine financially, politically, culturally, and in every other way, and pulls far more weight with Facebook. So, of course, Facebook is going to censor on behalf of the powerful against the marginalized. The thing that so many people on the left are too fucking stupid to understand, that these corporations do not use their power to help the marginalized. They use their power exactly in the opposite way. But the thing that I think is so important to note is this is really true. It sounds like I'm romanticizing Silicon Valley, and I'm not. Silicon Valley, when they first started pioneering social media, never wanted to censor at all.
Correct.
Not because they're noble people who believe in freedom, but because it was not in their business interest to get involved in these disputes and to have to pay people to remove content. They wanted everyone in the world to use their platform as much as possible. They don't want to be taking people off their platform. The reason they started doing this is because the obligation was foisted upon them largely by American and Western liberals and by journalists, most of all. So CNN or New York Times or NBC News turns their megaphone and says, look at the hatred Facebook is platforming. Look at what Twitter is permitting. Look at the violence, the violent rhetoric that Patreon is spreading. And they pressured and forced them to start removing them. And obviously, once you do that, it's not going to be only about one particular ideology. If for no other reason alone, they're going to balance it by also taking the left-wing extremist offline as well, but also because the status quo and ruling elites don't care about right or left. They hate all dissidents. Anybody who's on the fringes, who's on the margins, who questions their orthodoxies, who's outside of the lines that they impose, are always the ones who are going to get victimized by censorship. But, I think just two quick things. One is, you remember the torture debate, the debate over torture during the Bush years?
Yes.
I really always hated having to make the argument that torture doesn't work because it implied that if torture was effective in extracting accurate information, it would mean that it was justifiable. Torture was wrong regardless of the efficacy of it. It didn't matter whether it worked or not. It ought to be prohibited. For me, this argument about, well, you should oppose censorship because it's also going to eventually silence the left or is silencing the left, I'm somewhat uncomfortable with that argument because it's a utilitarian argument. Even if it were only affecting the right, you should still completely oppose it because we don't want a discourse limited and controlled and have the boundaries shaped by corporate elites or Silicon Valley overlords or officials of the state. You should be opposed to it on principle. But if you have no principles, if all you care about is power and strategy, then it's still incredibly stupid. And I know I'm not allowed to talk about GameStop because you have like Dylan Radigan coming on and only he can talk about it. But I do just want to say that something really interesting happened on the censorship front there, which is on the very day that Reddit subgroup was fucking the hardest with these hedge funds, the Discord platform that has become a really important platform for hosting a lot of the discussions about Wall Street Bets, the subreddit group that has led this, banned them. And when they banned them, they said, oh, we're not banning them because they're fucking with the most influential, powerful billionaires in the country. No, it has nothing to do with that. We're banning them because they're engaged in hate speech. We found hate speech was a remarkable coincidence of timing that exactly at the moment that they were fucking with billionaires, this platform suddenly found so much hate. Do you not see what is being done? When Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn were ascending to power, what was done? Their followers are abusive. Their followers use the internet for harassment. You have to kick their followers offline. This is the tactic that they're using that the fucking left created, that power centers have co-opted and are now wielding, having watched it be empowered, to say that anyone who challenges us is somebody engaged in hate speech. They tried very hard. They're still trying to say that this Reddit subgroup is like this 4chan neo-Nazi, white supremacist, anti-Semitic movement, because that's the play that neoliberals use for everything to silence people, and it has come from the left and has the full support of the left. The left that says that they hate neoliberals has created and pioneered the exact instrument, the weapon, that they now most effectively use against their opponents.
So I'm going to give you a chance to talk about that Reddit, because guess what happened on CNBC? They brought on the CEO of NASDAQ and the host at I don't know if you've been watching CNBC, but it is some of my favorite viewing right now. Just to watch their heads, they don't know what to do, right? It's like they got to get to the bathroom and there isn't one around and they don't know what to do. And so watch this.
We talked, we've mentioned social media. I couldn't help but it's not obviously similar to some of this controversy surrounding Facebook and Twitter and everything else. But once again, what's one of the things that we're talking about is maybe misinformation and pump and dumps, and it's occurring on social media again. I'm wondering whether it's part of the same problem, the type of regulation that we finally need to consider. And like I said, we should always have a light touch with regulation, but you're seeing the way things can get started. Again, this is different. Maybe it's Reddit, maybe it's not Facebook, but you're seeing the same situation. At this point, it's not about an election. It's not about an insurrection, but there are interesting things happening that seem to be spawned to some extent, or at least blown out of proportion by social media again, Adina.
So I don't know if you could hear all that, Glenn, but what he compared what they're doing on Reddit with Wall Street and GameStop to the insurrection on January 6th. He's comparing people doing completely legal things and trading and using the very system Wall Street set up. They're just getting it regular. When regular people get in on it, it's the equivalent of trying to overthrow the government. And so he's advocating to shut down social media. And now let's watch the CEO of NASDAQ. I bet she doesn't push back. Let's listen.
I do think, though, that as we look at these new technologies that are there available to everyone, including investors, I think it's also important for regulators to understand that, manipulation is manipulation, whether it's happening through a new technology medium or it's happening through traditional mail. So I think it's just a matter of making sure that we understand what the behavior is, what's underpinning the behavior, and working appropriately with the regulators to manage the situation, regardless of the technology that they're using.
So there she goes. So Glenn, you heard it. She wants regulators to manage the situation because regular people figured out a way to make money on Wall Street.
There's been several interviews on CNBC, and I agree totally. You should be watching CNBC only right now, never before and never again. But right now you should be, because it's a real mass dropping moment for them. Like we were talking about earlier, they really don't know what to do or say. They're really set back on their heels because these are not people who are breaking the law in order to win. They figured out their game. They studied and figured out their game, and through sheer numbers are overwhelming the system, and they're winning. And the hedge fund billionaires and short sellers are losing. And you see these people feeling like it's a violation of what's divinely ordained.
Yes.
And I think that this analogy with what happened at the Capitol is actually kind of interesting, because obviously there was a lot of behavior at the Capitol that was despicable. There really was. I mean, you watch a crowd bash the skull in of a police officer with a fire extinguisher, and you want those people imprisoned. There's no mitigating or justifying that. But I also think that the reason why people reacted to what happened at the Capitol so viscerally, people in the media, people in politics, was because it was a barbarians at the gate moment, right? It was some scummy, dirty, working class guy with his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. And it was like some loser who probably didn't go to college, touching the sacred podium. It had a very strong cultural and class component to it, while at the same time being a dangerous event. I'm not mitigating the danger, but I'm saying I think part of the reason it was exaggerated was because of this idea that these are the people who are not entitled to be in the Capitol, the sacred halls of political power. It's very much the same thing about how these people are reacting now, which is, yes, it's fine when hedge fund billionaires manipulate the market and make enormous sums of money for nothing. They produce nothing of value. They just move artificial numbers around on the spreadsheet, and then they get to buy their next boat with the heliport on it. But when it's these like anonymous, dirty Reddit trolls who don't even work on Wall Street, they're just like losers buried with college debt in the middle of the country, living with their fucking parents. They're not supposed to be the ones doing this. That's when it becomes truly alarming. You can see it in their face. They're not upset by the behavior. They're upset by who's doing it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so I think I just want to play this next clip for you. It's another guy from CNBC. And what I love about this is it brings together Russiagate now. So now Russia is being used to try to smear these Reddit people. Watch this.
What kind of case do they have? We like the stock. We like the stock. I mean, that's the case where Ryan Cohen got in. He bought 15% at $8. He's on the board. We like the stock. How is that bad? Or do you think that they're concentrated and doing some sort of manipulation if they say they like the stock?
Well, I don't know if they're concentrated because I don't have subpoena power and I can't really go out and look at it. I can argue I don't even know if there are foreign powers at work here behind the scenes trying to make chaos of our markets.
So they say, I don't even know if there's foreign powers manipulating, and then even Jim Cramer says, stop it. Even Jim Cramer had to say at that point. But you see...
And look at that guy's douchebag face like, when he got caught. Like, he's not used to being told. He's like, look at that. Look at that stupid fucking face, knowing that he said something incredibly stupid that he's used to, having taken seriously. But this time it was mocked, and it got the mockery it deserved.
Yeah, that would... So, again, it's... if we don't like something in America, you say it's Russia, it's Putin, we got to use censorship, it's radicals,
it's hate speech, it's hate speech,
it's hate speech. So if anything can be hate speech, by the way,
or harassment against the poor, hedge fund managers on their boats.
So
think about how they must be feeling, or the fucking snake emojis. Think about poor Elizabeth
Yes.
Warren sit down with Rachel Maddow for a 30-minute interview in the midst of like a huge pandemic and an economic meltdown, where the important thing is to talk about how Elizabeth Warren feels because people posted snake emojis because she had dark money funding her campaign through a fucking Silicon Valley, oligarch in order to keep her going through Super Tuesday and help elect Joe Biden, to contrary to all the things she ever said.